For decades, he was untouchable, hip-hop royalty, cloaked in power and wealth. But today, everything changed. In a silent, packed courtroom, the government stood tall and declared, "It's time to hold Sean Diddy Combs accountable." This wasn't just a trial, it was the fall of an empire. The courtroom was suffocating with tension, 3 overflow rooms, shoulder to shoulder, and not a single breath wasted. All eyes were on the man who once ruled music and media. For the first time in weeks, Diddy's entire family was present. His children, his mother, cousins, all gathered as the government pulled back the curtain. Step by step, the prosecution built a case decades in the making. A tale of money, fear, and absolute control. 16 times, they repeated the phrase, "He wouldn't take no for an answer." And with every repetition, the weight of those words tightened around the courtroom like a noose. The judge's orders were clear: no movement, no bathroom breaks, no cell phones. This was closing arguments. The final summation before fate was sealed. Then, the now infamous hotel video played again, Diddy brutally beating Cassie Ventura. The jury didn't flinch. But among his family, one of his twin daughters looked stunned. Especially when the prosecution revealed photos of the black Escalade tied to the drive-by at Kid Cudi's house, followed by haunting images of the firebombed Porsche, its roof slashed and body charred. Today, the prosecution laid bare the entire criminal blueprint. A road map more precise than GPS drugs, freak-offs, threats of violence, all running within a system that prosecutors called an enterprise. A machine fueled by staff, powered by fear, and designed to protect one man, Diddy. It began with Assistant U.S. Attorney Christy Slavic, who told the jury this wasn't about bad behavior. This was about organized crime, racketeering. She introduced 5 counts against Diddy, starting with the core, racketeering conspiracy. Behind her, a cold, methodical slideshow unfolded. This wasn't bad boy entertainment. It wasn't Revolt TV. This was the shadow organization built to serve, protect, and elevate Sean Combs, while burying the destruction left behind. She called it a kingdom. At the center, Diddy. Orbiting him were enablers, bodyguards, and assistants, his lieutenants. Not just staffers, but foot soldiers who enforced his will, buried his crimes, and isolated his victims. Then came the web, a flowchart mapping the Combs enterprise. At the top, Diddy. Below him, Christina KK Corum, the alleged right hand. Then the security team, D-Rock, Fahim, Roger Bonds, Rube's Uncle Paulie. Not just bodyguards, enforcers. Assistants like Eli Maroon, David James, George Kaplan, Brendan Paul. Each named and placed, each allegedly complicit. The prosecution made it clear, under racketeering laws, the jury doesn't need to believe every name committed a crime. Not even Diddy himself had to commit every act. All they needed were 2 predicate acts, 2 crimes committed in furtherance of this criminal enterprise. And the government had a full board of crimes to choose from. One by one, they listed them: drug distribution, kidnapping, arson, bribery, sex trafficking, forced labor, witness tampering, all presented as acts that weren't isolated, but organized. Drug distribution wasn't casual. It was operational. The sex parties, dubbed freak-offs, were fueled by drugs. Cocaine, meth, ketamine, oxycodone, Xanax, Molly, GHB, pink cocaine, known as Tussie. These didn't magically appear. KK, D-Rock, Fahim, and outside dealers like Baby Girl, One Top, and Guido made sure they flowed like tap water. Even one drug handoff met the legal threshold. Kidnapping? The prosecution said forget Hollywood dramatics. This wasn't about abductions. It was about people being held against their will. 3 examples struck hard. Cassie, allegedly held at the London hotel until her bruises healed. Not free to leave. Capricorn Clark, Diddy's assistant, reportedly taken to a vacant building by Uncle Paulie and forced into a polygraph test, with threats of ending up in the East River. Again Capricorn, forced into Diddy's car at gunpoint on the way to confront Kid Cudi. She told Cassie, "He won't let me leave unless you come." Diddy allegedly threatened, "Convince Kid Cudi to lie, or I'll kill you all." Arson was next. Kid Cudi's Porsche went up in flames. But this wasn't just property damage, it was a message. The roof slashed. A Molotov cocktail thrown. Prosecutors said it was all about fear. Fear to keep Cassie in line. Bribery? Surveillance footage of the Intercontinental Hotel beating became a hot target. Diddy's team allegedly offered hotel security thousands to bury the tape. When one guard refused, another was approached. Eventually, prosecutors said a deal was struck. $100,000 for silence. Phone logs, text messages, payments, all shown to the jury. Then came the money trail. KK, $600,000 per year. Brendan Paul, $100,000. These weren't assistants, they were operators. They booked hotel rooms for escort transport, arranged drug deliveries, and kept victims locked away. It was all presented as part of a machine, well-oiled, deliberate, and dangerous. Then came the most damning charge: sex trafficking. The prosecution broke it down to its legal core. Recruiting, enticing, transporting, or housing someone, knowing or ignoring that force, fraud, or coercion would be used to make them engage in a commercial sex act. Cassie's freak-offs. Jane's hotel nights. The staff facilitated it all. Coercion didn't just mean beatings. It could be threats, manipulation, psychological warfare, anything that pressured the victim into compliance. And the evidence? Overwhelming. The prosecutor wasn't flashy, but she was methodical, surgical. With each slide, each quote, each photograph, the courtroom grew heavier. By the end of the day, the vibe had changed. The circus outside? Gone. Influencers, who once joked about Diddy's freak-off next week, were silent. The courtroom was still. Diddy himself, usually smirking and scribbling notes, sat motionless. And just as Cassie and Jane once appeared willing in those tapes, performing under pressure, so too did the illusion of Diddy's innocence crack. This wasn't a party anymore. This was a reckoning. It only takes one night, one message, one moment where no was ignored, where power became pressure and sex became submission. In the eyes of the law, that's enough to convict. And the prosecution? They didn't come empty-handed. They brought an avalanche of receipts that could bury Diddy's empire for good. The prosecution wasn't just building a case, they were building a fortress. One where every brick was a photo, a message, a memory, or a moment of fear. And their message to the jury was piercingly clear. Diddy didn't need to know every detail. He only needed to set the machine in motion. If it affected commerce, even slightly, that alone could seal his fate. Then came the visuals. Chilling, unapologetic. 27 photos of different escorts. The air in the courtroom thickened as each image flashed on screen. It was heavy. 15 were linked directly to Cassie's freak-offs. 6 were connected to Jane's hotel nights. And 6 others? They overlapped, present in both women's stories. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. The prosecution didn't run from the elephant in the room. They charged at it. Consent. She faced the jury and said, "We're not asking you to believe that every freak-off or hotel night was sex." She admitted that, yes, Cassie and Jane once agreed to participate. At first, maybe even enjoyed it. But that wasn't the point. What mattered was this. If there was even one night when Diddy knew they didn't want it and pushed anyway, that alone was enough. Just one. Jane's hotel nights followed a ritual, a chilling pattern. She testified that it always happened the same way, exactly how Diddy wanted. She said she never really had a choice. And then the prosecutor unraveled Jane and Diddy's relationship into 4 harrowing stages. Love bombing. He swept her off her feet. Hotel nights, slowly introduced with luxury and drugs. Leverage, using money, rent, and power to trap her. The fallout. When Cassie's lawsuit surfaced, things only got worse. It mirrored the expert testimony of forensic psychologist Dr. Dawn Hughes. Textbook grooming. Jane was being primed, drawn into the fantasy. And once she was numb to the drugs, the oil, and the vibe, Diddy escalated. The freak-offs. The sex contracts. The baby oil. Jane agreed. Yes, but she didn't realize how fast it would all spiral. Diddy had everything lined up: the hotel, the escorts, the money, the lube. all before she even knew what she'd stepped into. She described it herself, a Pandora's box. She told him no in texts, multiple times. She said she was uncomfortable. She said she wanted to stop. But he still controlled everything. He watched her screen mirror live as she sexed the escorts. He turned pleasure into surveillance, trust into torment. Then came the love contract. A $10,000 a month apartment. It looked like support on paper. But to the prosecution, it was a leash. Look at the roof over your head. That wasn't comfort. That was control. You owe me. You don't get to say no. He knew Jane was dependent. He turned every no into a yes. That, the prosecution said, is coercion. And when Cassie's lawsuit exploded in public, Jane didn't suddenly find courage. She'd been saying no long before that. The prosecutor made it crystal clear. She wasn't copying Cassie. She was finally being believed. Then, the prosecutor sharpened the blade. Her words cut through the silence. He pressured her into hotel nights. He used carrots and sticks. He coerced her. That, she said, is sex trafficking. She laid out the law's 2 pillars. Interstate commerce. Jane was flown in. That's enough. Force, fraud, or coercion, only one needed. Not all 3. Even the baby oil and Astroglide counted. They were made out of state. That's commerce. That's trafficking. Then came the texts. Messages like, I love our freak-offs, when we both want it. That qualifier, when we both want it, was everything. Because, when only one wanted it, the crime had already occurred. The prosecution didn't stop. They marched forward with brutal examples. September 2023, New York trip. Jane thought it was a romantic getaway. Meanwhile, Diddy was texting escorts and booking cowboys for angels, before Jane even boarded the plane. Sobriety party. Jane was sick, had vomited. Still, Diddy pressured her to finish strong, to have sex with a 3rd escort that night. They called it a false promise, another act of coercion. June 2024, a violent fight. A freak-off the same night. Diddy looked her in the eye and said, "Is this coercion?" The prosecutor answered for him, "Yes." And he knew it. At that point, Diddy was already under investigation. And yet, he said those words out loud. The defense might argue that Jane was combative, that she hit him, cursed him. But the prosecution shut that down. That's not what this is about. What matters is that he crossed the line, and he did it knowingly. Then, she pivoted back to Cassie. It was never just about power. It was about control. Cassie wasn't just a girlfriend. She was an aspiring R&B artist, young, signed to Diddy's label. Someone he once described as young and moldable. He groomed her. Some days he was loving, other days violent. And that unpredictability, that was the strategy. It kept her off balance. It gave him control. Then the prosecutor walked the jury through Cassie's darkest moments, every attack, every night of terror. The hotel hallway beating caught on surveillance. The prince's house party assault. The moment her forehead was split open on a bed frame. The rape on her living room floor, after she'd moved on with Alex Fine. And then the text. "I know I looked bad to you. I could tell I didn't turn you on. I fell off." The prosecution called it what it was, an admission. And as she spoke those words, Diddy sat silent, staring at his hands. Why did Cassie go back? Why did she still sleep with him after the abuse? Trauma bonding. That's what the psychologist explained. An emotional prison sealed shut by fear. The prosecution warned, don't be fooled by the freak-off videos. Cassie appeared willing, but she was performing. She's performing. Just like Jane. Cassie wasn't just coerced. She was recorded. The videos were used against her. Blackmail. Emotional terrorism. Diddy even threatened to send the tapes to Cassie's parents, unless they wired him $20,000. The freak-off themselves became a way to coerce her into doing more. The jury was shown the hotel beating again. The prosecutor pointed and said, "This is what happened when she said no." Kicked. Slammed. And back in the room, a male escort was waiting. Not because she wanted it, but because Diddy arranged it. That is trafficking. Then came forced labor. Not just about sex, about domination. Mia, a former employee, said she was trapped, overworked, and afraid. Standing beside Diddy through it all? KK, Christina Coram, his chief of staff, his fixer. She aided him as he used women for his sexual pleasure. And as the closing argument ended, the prosecutor faced the jury and delivered her final blow. For years, Sean Combs got away with it because of his money, his power, his influence. That stops now. It's time to hold him accountable. It's time for justice. Tomorrow, the defense gets its one shot, one final chance to rewrite the story, to convince the jury that this wasn't trafficking, wasn't violence, just misunderstood kink, excess, and fame. But with the evidence stacked high and the government's roadmap crystal clear, the battle ahead is nothing short of Everest. Will Diddy walk free? Or is this the day the empire crumbles? Stay tuned.